Agreed. All right, and the last announcement that we're going to cover from Google Cloud Next is the one that I'm most interested in, and that is that they announced a new interoperability protocol that they're calling Agent to Agent. Now, if you're keeping score, you might be a little confused because this is, I think, 3 weeks in a row we're talking about some form of an interoperability
New protocol,
effort.
yes.
New protocol, yet another one. So just to kind of keep you up to speed, we talked a lot last week, and we'll talk about more in a second about Anthropic's Model Context Protocol, or MCP. The week before, we talked about agency, which is another collective effort. This one led by Cisco in coordination with Glean and I think it's LangChain, a few others, and so this is interesting. I think the most salient part is that Agent to Agent does not appear to compete with MCP, and in fact, Google also announced support of MCP. It would look to be complementary to MCP in that whereas MCP is really about the relationship between an agent and an underlying system of record, Agent to Agent, as its name would imply, is about the relationship between agent and another agent. So if in theory I have an agent that is using MCP to connect to a system of record to take some transaction and then needs support of something else, rather than directly connecting to that system of record, it might go to another agent who is accessing via MCP, that other system of record, and it is handling effectively a load balancing kind of effort where we're handing off, or a mixture of experts sort of model. I mean, however you want to think of it, right? Where you have these different agents. And so there's lots of, I think what's interesting is it opens up sort of architectural opportunities about how you engineer these things. Now, I do think it's fairly competitive to agency, because agency was also about agent to agent interoperability. And they're taking fairly different approaches from what I can tell so far. And I haven't really dug deep into the covers here of agent to agent yet, but it does look very interesting. I will say, whereas agency seemed to sort of whimper out of the gate with a very small number of sort of sponsoring companies and not a whole lot of clarity as to what it exactly was. Agent to Agent announced with, I think, 50 sponsors. I think of this like in politics, like co-sponsors of the bill, a whole bunch of different people and major players, ServiceNow, Salesforce, a whole bunch of significant players as part of it. So quite interesting, and I think could be again another really big play for them if they are successful in making MCP and Agent to Agent the de facto pair. That would bode very well for Google. I mean, what was your take on it?
Yeah, so just looking at the Google blog, I'm going to give a selection of vendors that are partners because the entire list is too long. But Atlassian, LangChain, MongoDB, Salesforce, SAP, ServiceNow, Workday, basically creme de la creme of enterprise applications in the cloud. And then on the service provider side, Accenture, Capgemini, Cognizant, Deloitte, KPMG, McKinsey, basically everybody you would want on the consulting side that is going to build billion-dollar practices of AI. So obviously, this is going to have some immediate legs out of the gate. Even half these vendors are serious about supporting this. And what I also find interesting is that from a technical perspective, agent to agent isn't just looking at text agents, but also looking at video and audio, where Google has obviously been strong in creating AI models. And the idea of having this more holistic agent to agent capability is potentially really helpful in breaking these agentic silos. And I think this also might provide some room for additional players to come in and say, well, we're going to be agent to agent, but we're going to focus more on text because there are specific use cases that we think we can break the silos down on, and while maintaining the jargon for legal or medical or all of these other areas that do require very specific domain knowledge. So there's going to be room here for both general players and specific players. I think I could be wrong, but the agent to agent work seems complicated enough that there's not going to be one solution that can cover every enterprise scenario.
Well, and I do think, to a certain extent, this fits well with Google's strength, right? Google does play well the sort of big picture macro view. They haven't always done a great job of figuring out how to monetize and how to transform these into like legitimate products. But I think this is a nice fit for sort of their view of the world. And what I really appreciate about it is I think they're tackling it in the proper way, right? So one of the core tenets of the protocol of the agent agent is this idea of a discovery mechanism, or where an agent effectively advertises its capabilities. And this is something we've seen in other um, approaches in the past, and it's an extremely effective model because it has baked in scalability and it makes a ton of sense. And of course, they're also relying heavily on JSON as the foundational transport mechanism. Again, a well-established industry standard. And so I think it makes a lot of sense, and it's going to sort of lay the foundation here. So I think I think it's a winner. I think they're going to have, they're going to have a lot of legs on this. And, the question will remain, does this actually help Google anything in any way other than saying, hey, we've established this? Does it actually have any market? I mean, because part of the whole thing is it's an open standard, which means AWS can sign up tomorrow and be an agent to agent player. And does that confer any advantage to Google? I don't know, but I feel like it's a good move, and I'm very intrigued. I will have a little quick sidebar comment on it, because I think they made the announcement. They made a big point of Accenture and Deloitte and KPMG, and I was chuckling just because I feel like, does that hold any weight anymore? I feel like every single announcement we see from any major player, it's always Accenture, Deloitte, and KPMG that have announced their support, and they're already doing it. So they're basically doing everything with everybody. So I don't know if that matters. I just thought it was funny.
I do feel like so whether I think Accenture and Deloitte are important, and we're going to get to this a little bit later in the show. I do think that when large consultancies put their eggs in a basket, they are expecting this to be something that can make them a lot of money. They're not going to bet on every startup that shows up or every protocol that shows up unless they think it can drive, call it $100 million in business, several $100 million in business. They're not going to put their eggs in a basket for something that they're only going to make a couple $1 million on.
Fair enough. All right.
At least they'll shove it down our throats.
All right. Well, agent to agent, we'll see where that goes. We'll kind of keep you up to date as that develops. But like I said, I'd be betting on that one.